Hi, I'm Sumit Bose, and this is the Net Hero podcast. Who's it for? It's for you. If you care about the planet, then you care about business. We believe that businesses are responsible for a lot of the damage that has been done to the planet, but they're also responsible for finding the solutions. We need innovation, we need ideas, we need people who are trying to make a difference, and that's what this podcast is about. If you know someone who is trying to make a change, then get them to come along on the podcast. Listen in every week, subscribe, and make sure that you follow us on social media. Our two news platforms, Energy Live News and Future Net Zero, cover everything we do. And this episode is recorded live, so enjoy. Now, you won't think it, but I am bloody old. And 33 years ago, I walked into the BBC TV studios in my first job in television. And I hadn't a clue about anything really. And probably, to be honest, nothing's much changed. But one thing was for sure, there was nothing about the environmental impact of what we were doing. I'd go out in diesel cars, we'd drive around, we'd have film crews, we'd have loads of big lights, electricity, we'd be using stuff. We had kind of no idea about kind of the environmental footprint of our videotapes or anything like that. Until film and television has changed a lot in the last kind of 30 odd years. And I think one thing that's happened, and perhaps we don't think about it when we're watching, but the environmental cost of our entertainment is now something people are looking at very seriously. So what can be done? You may have seen on TV programs something at the end that says Albert Production. We'll explore a bit of that. But in essence, has the film industry and the TV industry got to clean up its act? Well, that's what I'm going to do today. And I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Julie Ho from Garden Studios, which is a film and TV studio, correct?
Yes.
You do film and TV
Yep.
in central London. And you're pretty green from what I hear. Is that right? Not just the name, Garden.
We try very hard.
Julie, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast. Let's just start with, I suppose the thing that people won't know, and it's only because I've been in the industry, is there is a bloody massive footprint for everything we see, isn't there? So from a film or a TV show, even the news, give us an idea of the kind of things, before we explain what you're doing, that kind of affect the environmental impact of this stuff. What are the things that people might not think actually, oh my gosh, that's quite big in the film and TV industry?
Yeah, I think from my own experience, I think when I started working for Garden Studios, I was absolutely shocked by the amount of waste.
Yeah.
Volumes of waste. That surprised me the most because when you see a film and it's filmed in a flat in Camden, you think they've actually been in a flat in Camden and filmed, but they haven't. They have built a fake flat in Camden, supposedly in Camden, in our studios. And after filming, they just put everything in a skip and throw it out. And that was for furniture, for huge sets, lots of wood. And that really, really kind of shocked me to the extent that I've become a very big reuse champion. So we have, we actually won a prize for this in Cannes last year for our reuse program. So we make a huge effort in helping productions channel all their props and set material to people that can reuse it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a thing. I suppose maybe people have seen these documentaries. Like I liked Stranger Things. I was watching how they made it. But what struck me, there's a scene in it with this kind of like, inside this monster's belly thing, but it's all made of foam, right? And they sculpt the foam or whatever. Then they sprayed it, they used lacquer, they used all this stuff, and and then at the end of it, they just threw it away.
Yeah.
Right? They blow things up in movies, they blow things up in television. There's fireballs, we've all seen of this. Now a lot of it is CGI now, but a lot of it's still proper stuff. So is it one of those things, like you say, you came to the industry, no one really thinks about it, but it's probably been something that, if you make a car, you're under scrutiny. If you fly somewhere, you're under scrutiny. The food we eat, the film industry has kind of had a pass, hasn't it? We've not really thought about it.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And if you go buy a pair of sneakers, when you've used them, you end up with that sneakers. So you think, what should I do with that now? But with
Correct.
you don't you don't think about it that same way.
No.
It's not a physical thing that ends up in your house that you have to put in the bin. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you. But there's a lot more focus on this now, I think, than there has been. And I've seen a huge, in the 5 years I worked for Garden, I've seen a huge change in the attitudes of production coming in. It's not as much as I'd like, but for example, now most productions will have a sustainability consultant who's
Yeah.
on this, yes, whose sole purpose is to kind of make everything as sustainable as possible. So that's made a huge change. And I think, I mean, we're not there by any means, but we're absolutely getting, we nudging there, I would say.
If you look at television, right, as I said, when I joined, it was in the early 90s, there was a massive amount of personnel, right? But you'd had to get everyone there. So
Yeah.
we went in cars, which were generally obviously petrol and diesel cars in those days. We had these thing called sat trucks. Now, if anyone's been to like film stuff, they may have seen these things where you go to Leicester Square and you see these massive kind of trailers. But in actual film studios, my God, the amount of stuff there, electrical generators, there's food, there's catering, all of that. In the past, was it just, do you think it was just because this had come out as just the way the industry was? The idea of waste wasn't really, I don't know, it was probably just a budget item, wasn't it, I suppose?
Yeah, but I think it's like everything, if you go back 20 years, we probably didn't think about recycling our
No.
own waste the way, we do now. We don't think about, maybe buying, we didn't think about maybe buying products that were made of recycled plastic
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we choose that over another product. So I think it's all changed, with everything else. But what I've noticed that just a few years ago, I think the budgets for film productions were enormous,
Yeah.
and various strikes and reorganizations in the film industry have made that the budgets are not so generous as they used to be. And I've noticed a more kind of cost focus, which is good. For example, we had a film production in which all the costumes were bought in secondhand shops.
Ah,
Yeah, which made me really, really happy. And all their props were then, instead of thrown, they were sold on to another production. So, so you see we're getting there. I mean, it's slow,
yeah.
but slowly, slowly, people are more mindful about these issues.
Now, so obviously you work in the studios, right? And
Yeah.
people who don't know, and I do, you're dealing with one of the most flaky group of human beings on the planet Earth, right? Yeah.
I can't
Directors.
say that about our clients.
You can't say I can, right? People who work in the creative industries, oh, darling, and all that crap. But let's be honest, they have visions, right? And
Yeah.
their vision is, I want to make something. And they don't think, hang on a second, where's that going to come from, whatever. So, what I'm trying to get to is you have a job, and you said, which is really refreshing, there are more people like you in the film industry and TV industry, right? Is there a tension between what the director or producer or even the actors want to do, and then you sitting in the production go, well, yeah, but you can't burn down 1,000 trees for the battle scene. So is that starting to come into it where people like you, are you listened to? That's what I'm trying to get to, really.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we had some, people early on that were actually completely against what we were trying
Of
to do.
course.
But that's rarer now, I would say. And also, I think it depends a lot on the people at the top of the production. So
Right.
if the head of production is interested, we had one last year who he personally was clearly interested in
Yeah.
sustainability,
Yeah.
and he attended all the meetings we had, and they were,
Ah,
and it was a whole, so it varies a lot from production to production. And also, I think sometimes there could be a disconnect between, the sustainability policies of some of the large streamers that whose names I'm not going to mention, but you all know what they are,
yeah.
and actually what happens on the ground, because on the ground you have a kind of a group of freelancers who brought together, who don't necessarily work together all the time,
Of
who
course.
hasn't necessarily read the sustainability policy of XYZ streamer.
Yeah.
And so that's been a bit of an issue, that
Yeah.
they don't know what the goal of their employers really are. So
And,
that
and I think that's an interesting thing because people probably don't know, right? We're in the industry. but most films, a bunch of people come in who don't know each other. They
Yeah.
make a film and then they bugger off and do other films. So
Mm.
it's not like the same team. Very rarely you get that. And
Mm.
in terms of for you as a studio, you have multiple different people coming in, don't you? Multiple productions coming in. So when it comes to someone coming in, how how high up or how immediate is this sustainability? Because obviously people will go, right, I need two studios and I want 100 shooting there, whatever they're doing, right? So they've
Mm.
got a budget. How often do you come up in the conversation? Are you someone comes as an afterthought, or are you now someone that's sitting there at the beginning when they book the studio?
No, unfortunately not yet.
Uh,
I
keep
think
going, Julie.
I'm hoping, I'm hoping. No, I think at the moment it's sort of, the sustainability consultants, for example, which are usually
Yeah,
my personal contact, comes in later in the process. Once
right.
they move in, they're never involved at the contract stage. And once they move in, they start, physically being on our,
Mm,
start building the sets, then they come in. I wish they were earlier on in the process,
yeah.
but we're not quite there yet.
That's interesting because if you look at business, general business is not in your industry, a lot of sustainability are very high up. That's one of the first things they look at when they do a contract is
Mm.
this. Is it, do you think it's just because it's traditionally not been a thing, or is it because there's a reluctance from the creative industry? Because in a way, you should be there at that first meeting, shouldn't you, before they book it?
I should. I wish I had the answer to that question. I don't know if it's because of that the fragmented nature of this industry, as we talked about,
Yeah.
lots of different moving parts, lots of subcontractor freelancers being together. I think maybe it's easier in an environment where you're the same team all the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
which is not the way it works. And also, this is one of the things that one of the things that we struggle with is to get our clients to recycle properly.
Mm.
And I make posters and I stick them everywhere, and still people put food waste in the
Yeah.
recycling
Yeah.
bin. So, and I have a feeling that if we were people in an office that work together all the time, it
There'd
would
be a
be
habit. Yeah.
yes, and it would be sort of a team effort and people be motivated to do it, and we could have, targets of, let's, here's how much more recycling we do now compared to last year. But of course, with film production, it doesn't work like that because it's, as we talked about, a group of random people put together for a short or, for a limited amount of time. So, yeah, anyway, I think that is part of the problem in the industry generally.
When you talk to people like yourself in other studios, first of all, I don't know how many studios people have heard of, like Pinewood and maybe Leeds and things like that. I don't know how many major studios there are in the UK, but do they all have someone like you, or are you sort of quite still unique in being
I,
employed?
I think I'm quite unique. I hear from, colleagues at other studios. They say, "Oh, you're lucky that you have this." So I think I'm quite fortunate because
Right.
I do focus on this. I don't think it's normal to have a dedicated sustainability person in
Mm,
the studio, and I think that's why. But also that's why we've had time to become a B Corp, for example. We're the only B Corp studio in Europe. We're the second one in the world. That it takes a lot of time, that whole process. So I can see why, not every studio has the time and resource to do that. Um, yeah, no, so I am quite lucky, and I
you're,
know I
you're you're in a class of your own.
am. I am.
I want to talk about some of the stuff that the volume stage. I'll get to that in a second because I think people will be interested in that. But
Yeah.
just give us an idea of the kind of um, elements of a production and the kind of environmental impact. So we talked about sets, but there's like food. You said costumes. What other things in your studio would we walk in if we're not in the film business and go, oh my gosh, look at all this stuff that's going on? What are the areas that you have to concentrate on?
Well, so there's an energy consumption, obviously,
Of
and
course, yeah,
the good news on that is that I mean, we now have 100% LED lights across our campus.
brilliant.
And we've seen a huge drop in energy consumption, actually. From because also, film productions used to bring in tungsten lights and
Yeah,
very
yep, yep.
energy consuming lights, and they don't do that same degree anymore. So we can see that in our energy, because we monitor our energy consumption, and then rebill our clients, so we know how much they consume.
Right.
So that's one. The other one, which is one that I'm sort of one of my pet peeves, is that we have a no diesel generator policy on our studio.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
And more studios have that now. I've noticed that it's getting more common. And
Because they bloody stink as well as the noise. They're awful.
absolutely. So
Yeah,
we try as much as we can to tell people to use our grid power.
right.
But occasionally, because on the unit base, people will have a catering
Yep,
van and they need a generator.
generator.
It's
Yeah.
physically far away from the building. So they sometimes bring in, or quite often bring in generators, and then we have a policy of we don't want them to bring a diesel generator.
Okay.
So what people do then is they use if they can't connect to our grid power, they use HVO fuel.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I mean, there's some controversy around HVO fuel in that not all HVO fuel is HVO fuel.
Of course.
Yeah. So there's some issues around that. So eventually when they're electric or solar powered
Yeah.
battery powered generators would be, that would be even better.
So we've got energy, which makes sense,
Yeah.
right? What
Mhm.
what other areas? You talked about sets. So do you have
Yes.
rules on what the sets can be made of? Because obviously there's toxic chemicals. It's very difficult, isn't it? Because people have to use these things to make a look sometimes.
Yeah. It's a tough one because we can't tell people, in a way we're a hotel, we
Yeah, I get it.
places to our clients, and you can tell people not to ruin your hotel room, but you can't tell them what to do in your hotel room,
No,
you know what I
true.
mean? So we can encourage them to use, we encourage them very much to reuse the set material when they've used
Yeah.
it. We have an organization, local organization, that will take the wood and build buildings of it. But to tell them what materials to use is
It's
quite
it's tough,
tricky. Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah.
And also the thing is that that's decided long before they come to us, because they'll do all this planning, and the art department will do a lot of planning and set designers long before they decide necessarily to come to us. So we're not really part of that discussion. We're not, so we can't control that, unfortunately.
Food. What do you do about food? Because
Food.
that's something you could do, like food waste and whether
Yeah.
you recycle it or turn it into compost or whatever. What are you doing around that?
Yeah, so we have food waste, separate food waste recycling, which is actually mandatory by law in this country now.
Good.
So catering operators, they're typically booked by the production. So again, the menu has an impact. Do
Of
you go
course.
low meat, high meat, etc. And again, that's not something we can
No, of
dictate.
course.
But we try to help them with the food waste. Sometimes they do that themselves, sometimes they do it through us. We try to make sure they don't, well, we make sure they don't use these diesel generators. We try to connect them to our grid power. We source 100% renewable grid power. So that's really
And what
also,
about things like, the paper plates, plastic, what
yeah,
about that sort of stuff on set?
yeah, no, it varies. Many of them use vegware, which
Oh,
is
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so a bit complicated, because then you need to use special composting for that. You can't just throw it in
No.
recycling, because it needs to be a certain temperature to compost. I had a production the other day that wanted to use a company called Reuser, which is reusable cutlery,
Ah,
and
okay. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So we always promote these, we have a group of kind of list of companies and say, oh, do you want to use these guys for your cutlery and, food boxes? So that's an option. But that, yeah, so that those are really the issues around food that
Yeah.
But again, we can just kind of nudge them in that direction. At the end of the day, is they decide, and there's always a cost involved. You using reusable
Yeah.
crockery is more expensive, basically. So, there's always that element, and they are.
I think that analogy you said is very clever, isn't it? You're a hotel, you can't tell the guests what to do in their rooms. But I suppose if you go to a hotel, you'll see recycling bins, right? They'll
Yeah.
say your water is in glass rather than plastic and all that. So they make the environment. Is that something you can do, or is that again limited because, like you just said, they can bring in their own caterers and bring in their own thing? What I'm trying to say is, how many levers can you pull?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, one lever on that we do pull quite hard is that no idling policy. We don't want people
Okay.
to idle in on our premises, and that involves me knocking on
When
hands.
you're engine off.
So we have signs everywhere which people don't seem to necessarily pay attention to, but so it's just creating that awareness around what you can do. And of course, the no idling policy is not only about the CO2 emissions, it's about the air you breathe in.
Of course.
So, and that's always an easier argument that, do you want your crew to breathe in air from this diesel
Yeah.
truck just sits there and idles? So that, that's one that is, it's not easy because people forget but you have to remind them and yeah. So that's one that we feel that we say categorically we don't want. And same thing with single-use plastic. So we don't want people. So we have water dispensers,
Yeah. Yeah.
mains connected water dispensers, and encourage people to use water bottle, reusable water bottles. And in our cafe, we don't sell anything in kind of plastic containers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And in terms of, the studio, are you like in an area where there's houses? Are you because that's another thing, like whether your neighbors are, if you're an industrial estate, perhaps you can get away with a bit more, but I wouldn't like to be living next to a studio where there's like loads of diesel and the
Mm.
fumes and the smell of these things. So I don't know where you're based, but what are your restrictions, or what are you trying to do around your neighborhood?
Yeah, well, luckily we are in an industrial park, so we don't have any neighbors which are sensitive to these things. But we still want to, the air is the air,
Of
that
course it is. Yeah.
around. So we don't think about, but of course, from a noise perspective, it's easier to be where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but the other thing about us is that we are, when it comes to transport, you mentioned in the beginning that you drove
Yeah.
hours
Yeah.
yeah. So we are in northwest London, very close, 5 minutes away from a tube line,
You're
an
trying to encourage
underground
public
line.
transport. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have lots of people using line bikes reaching our studios. And so, and we, that's one of our unique selling points that we are reachable by public transport so in so many ways.
You don't get any. What about the A-listers? They want to come in their Cadillac, don't
Yeah,
they?
yeah, of course. But at least they don't have to drive for an hour and a half to get there. Yeah. Yeah.
um, it's an interesting one because I don't expect you to name anything, but people know, like, well, I think some of it is bullshit, but Leonardo DiCaprio goes on about the environment, right? And there are certain actors that have a thing. Is it starting to come in? You talked about there are people now in production, depends on the director or the producer who are. Do you get it with the actors as well, who are like, hey, let's. Are you seeing anything like that?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily know the details of that because the productions are quite secretive.
Yeah, of course.
They don't really talk too much about who works on it, and and even the name of the production is usually
Is it? Yeah, is it? Yeah.
painful there. But what I do know is that there's something called the Green Rider. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
It's a sort of a commitment that you get from top talent
Oh
to
yeah.
behave sustainably.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so and that I know is more and more productions actually get their top talent to sign on to that. So obviously I hope. I mean, we had, one of the productions that we had, and I think that that's official, is Kate Winslet's last film.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and which was made at our studio, and she clearly personally was very interested in this, and
Ah.
As I said, that was the production who had all the clothes bought secondhand, and so she's clearly very interested in this, and that trickled through the whole production, and
Yeah,
that
it's interesting.
yeah. So more of that would be great. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So long as she doesn't recycle the dress from the Titanic, then we're all right.
Well, I'm sure that's sold at auction somewhere a long time ago.
Let's talk about people. I said at the beginning, you may see TV programs and it says an Albert production.
Yeah.
Now, can you explain to the audience what Albert is? Because it's been around a while, and it's from my understanding, it's kind of a commitment across film and TV. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's I think I'm pretty sure all BBC programs have to be Albert
Yeah,
certified. I'm
yeah,
pretty sure they do.
yeah.
In film, it's still, I think I would say probably 90% of our clients are Albert certified. So
And
what
what does it mean?
yeah, so basically it's a certification that has to do with, as you said, catering, material, energy use. All these aspects are monitored, usually by a sustainability consultant on the production, and then you have to report in how much what your emissions are at the end. And they want to incentivize you to have as little emissions as possible. We are also Albert certified, but in a studio, what's called
Yeah,
the Albert Studio Standard. And this has been really good for us because it's become a lever for me internally towards my management to say that, we have an Albert rating, want to prove our Albert rating. So I need X, Y, and Z. We moved to 100% LED this past year, and that's once you move up, you get a higher Albert point, and you get a better
gotcha.
Albert rating. And it's all kinds of different, if different issues there. There are nature, what you do, how much of your
Yeah, it's true. I didn't talk about that. Yeah,
studio is nature. I mean, it's a bit tough for us because we're central
of
London
course.
located. But there's energy use, you get points for using renewable energy, which we use. And we now have also biogas, 100% biogas. So you get extra points for that. So they monitor all these things and also some social aspects. If you have, a nursery on the lot, you get points for that. I mean,
Gotcha.
fortunately, we don't
So,
have enough.
is it like a kind of voluntary code though? Sort of, it's the industry is signed up to it rather than you're forced to by government, sort of thing.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's voluntary, but it's now becoming I think there are 30 studios signed up
Oh
now.
wow. Okay.
Um,
So it's
so
becoming a standard then, really.
yeah, I think, we took part the first year, which was 4 years ago. So I think now it's become probably a sort of why you're not part of this. I'm imagining, I don't
Okay.
know. I'm not a film producer, so I wouldn't know if they, but I'm thinking, I know that some producers wouldn't choose a non
Yeah, understood.
yeah.
Let's talk about one of the things that's going to change, and we're already seeing it, right? Is AI, obviously. But
Mm,
I am a bit of a Star Wars geek, so I love this thing called The Mandalorian. And
yeah.
one of the things about The Mandalorian is a lot of it was shot in a studio, but
Mm,
all the background was this massive screen, and it
mm,
looks like the desert. So they don't have to go to the desert, and they cut all of this stuff. You've got one of these things. I don't know what they
yeah.
call it, the volume or whatever. Can you
Mm.
explain why you think this way of filmmaking can help start to reduce some of the environmental impact of film in the future?
Yeah, so this is interesting. There's been, as you know, quite a few studies done on this. So basically, virtual production, which is called, are basically huge walls of LED panels that are either a flat wall or more like a concave, like almost like a cave,
Yeah,
where you can project images, videos, you can make images, in sort of a sci-fi film, you would probably create the images on the background. And then you film it, and when you move the camera, there are, sensors in the ceiling that makes the camera, when you move the camera, the background moves as
oh
if,
wow.
yeah,
Okay, gotcha.
as it would in real life, so it's
Very
really
clever.
interesting. Yeah, you should come around and have a look.
Yeah, I'd love to see. Yeah.
Yeah. So what this does is that this makes it easy to film anywhere, anytime. Um,
Right.
yeah, so examples. We've had lots of commercials doing this. So we had a commercial for a gaming company, and they wanted to make one scene in Tokyo, one scene in New York, and one scene in Rio. And you can imagine going there with their film crew in all these
The old
places.
way.
The
Yeah. Flights, the
impact would be
missions.
enormous, yeah.
Yeah.
And also the time, it would take
Of
them a
course.
lot of time. So what they did, they came to us and they did it all in, I think they spent 2 days doing it and
Amazing.
filming all, and you can't tell. You think you're in Tokyo because the
Mm.
background is, so that is a new type of production, and there's been studies, quite a few studies now made comparing, how this differs if you were to go on location, or if you were to film it in a virtual production stage, because there, obviously virtual production, they uses more energy
Of
because of these
course. Yeah.
LED panels.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then you save a lot of panel on travel, for example, or hotel accommodation.
Food, everything. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so in fact, Albert came out with a report just last year, where they found that 65% of carbon emissions associated with film productions are generated by travel, which is
Wow.
which is very, very high. And
Yeah.
30
It makes sense because they film in so many locations. Of course.
Yeah, so 30% of that is flights alone. So
Wow.
you can imagine. So you can save, not having, but it's also it's more actually also about saving time, because when you film on a virtual production stage, the director can be there and get exactly the shot type he wants. You can adjust the lighting and you can
Yeah.
film. You don't have to wait for the rain to stop or the snow to stop,
It's
whatever.
true.
You can control the environment entirely. You can film day scenes in the nighttime. You can do all these things. So the result is that you spend a lot of less time in post-production.
Yeah.
And this is actually where the big savings is, that you save a lot of time, because time, of course, is people traveling to the post-production studio, working, heating, cooling of that studio. So that in itself is 20 to 30% of savings. So that's actually a huge. And the
It's a
other,
it's a funny one because you've nailed it. It all comes down to money in the end, doesn't it? Really.
absolutely.
If this can make things, the question is, do you think it will? Because obviously, A, there's an ego thing. B, there's a realism thing. C, film stars like to jet off and go to exotic locations. But I have seen it used a lot more.
Mhm.
And are you seeing it as something now that will become more mainstream because of these environmental pressures? Because if it works, I mean, and if I can't tell the difference as a viewer, what does it
Mhm.
matter?
Sadly, I wish it was all sustainability driven. I think it's a combination
Of
of
course.
convenience, and you're right, film stars like to travel, but I actually think that they probably travel so much it's probably not that fun anymore. So
Yeah, it's true.
if they can come down from their house in Notting Hill to us and it takes 20 minutes in a car, and they could, instead of traveling to Morocco and
Yeah,
shooting,
yeah, yeah.
I think maybe that is
They're
an
home for dinner. Yeah.
yeah, no, but exactly, home for dinner and with their kids and everything. So I think, yeah, I think there are many reasons. The other thing is, of course, the set material involved, because
Yeah.
if you don't need to build film set, because what happens on a virtual production set is that you have some physical assets in the foreground. So,
Yeah, I've
if in
seen
the
it. Yeah.
airport, for example, you will have some chairs and maybe a check-in desk physically,
Yeah.
physically. But you don't need to do all the chairs and all the
Mm.
windows and everything in the background. So you have this anyway, so you have this, there are some physical props, but much fewer
So the
than
carbon's a lot less, obviously.
a lot. The waste is a game changer. It's completely different.
What about AI? People have talked about AI, and there's loads of different things about AI, but we've seen it. I
Yeah.
mean, it still looks a bit pants, but it is getting better and better. And
Mhm.
some scenes are being done. Can
Mhm.
you see? the way, and there's a different conversation about energy and AI, but not for now. But
Yeah.
in terms of what for your industry, again, could that be something that starts to reduce the footprint of the things you have to do when you want to make an explosion or you want to, pollute something or burn trees? You can just do it all in in virtual reality.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not an AI expert, and I don't
No.
have a lot of knowledge of how exactly this will influence the way films are made in this context. But what I do know is that, of course, AI consumes an enormous amount of energy.
Yeah.
So, it's 10 times, if you do a Google search and an AI search, the AI search on your computer is 10 times the amount. So exactly how that's going to turn out
Yeah.
is something that I don't feel I can be give you a very kind of insightful answer, but
Yeah.
I do know it consumes an enormous amount of energy, and that has to be weighed up against. And also, to be honest, what I've seen of AI so far, you can tell, can't you?
What, the Brad Pitt fighting Tom Cruise one? Yeah, that's the best one.
No, I
It's
don't think,
always,
but
yeah, go on.
having said that, they move so fast, so
They will be
probably
getting better. I
in
mean,
2 months
hey,
it would look really, really good. But anyway.
I listen. I remember Terminator 2, and it looked good at the time, and then you look at it now, it looks awful. But um, to end with, where it's a very interesting industry. I don't think people realize the gaming, filming, TV industry is enormous in the UK, right?
Mm.
Brings
Yeah.
a lot of money to the economy. People
Mhm.
think about manufacturing, but it's huge. We
Mhm.
have a lot of skills here. I know that there are people working in brilliant studios and all that, but it's probably been hidden until this podcast is a good one too, about its environmental impact. What are you hoping in the next 5 years for your industry in terms of the way business has
Mm.
changed, the way cars and transport has changed? Are you hoping there will be mandatory people like you in every production?
Absolutely. I know exactly what I want, and that is tax incentives tied to sustainability.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
and this because as you know, tax well as you I don't know if you know, but the tax incentives in the UK are very attractive, and that has
Yeah,
helped build
the
up a
film industry. Yeah,
huge film industry with experts in every field, and has been very much driving the success of the UK film industry. The thing is that the way this works in Austria, for example, is that you get a 30% tax break for filming in Austria, and then you get a 5% uplift if you adhere to some pretty kind of strict sustainability requirements.
right.
So you have to have a sustainability consultant, you have to have a third party evaluating your sustainability, assessments like the Albert, there's a third party verifying it. And quite, I think that as we talked about earlier, I think money talks. And I think this is the only way that's going to move the needle in a big way, because you can't rely, it's voluntary at the moment. And
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and especially now where, you know, 2, 3 years ago, the pressure to be sustainable was bigger than it is now.
mm,
It seems to have trickled a little bit for political reasons,
yeah, of course.
especially
Yeah.
maybe in America. So I think the focus to kind of refocus on this, we need some financial incentives. That's my big wish.
Is it something we as the public should think about? I suppose we can't really, can we? Like you said, it's
Well, I mean, if you're a politician listening, yeah,
they
but
don't like me, so they
I mean,
probably won't ask me.
we we as the public, I don't know how we can move the needle on this. I don't know if we can. Uh, I mean, we're not going to stop watching films that are
No,
not Albert certified, are we? Are we
exactly.
realistically? I don't
So it's
know.
got to come from the industry and it's got to come from incentives. That's your view.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah,
Yeah.
sadly, I think so. Regulation
Well,
or
you keep sticking those stickers up, telling them drivers to stop idling, Julie, because I think you're
yeah,
doing a very good job. Thank you so
yeah,
much for coming
story
on
of
the
my life.
podcast. You know, it's brilliant. You've really explained an area I think that people have got a lot of interest in, but didn't have any knowledge. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Huge pleasure. Great,
Yeah,
thank you.
brilliant. Let us know what you think. Let us know, audience, what you think. Get in touch on the social media. And my thanks to Julie. Thanks to Rob for the production this week. See you on the next episode of the Net Hero podcast.
You've just heard the Net Hero podcast from FutureNetZero.com. Join us as we help you find ways to cut your carbon footprint as we head towards net zero. Subscribe and follow us on social media. FutureNetZero.com. Better business, better planet.